Hello, Ryan here from Ryan's Electrical Staff, and in today's video we're going to be looking at these two things here. These are 24 volt DC power supplies out of, this one on the right is out of a Thermoplan BW3, 24 volt, reads at 6.7 amps. The one on the right is from an Eversys E4 coffee machine. This one actually has dual rails. This has 24 volts at 8 amps, and it also has a 3.7 volt control rail at 0.3 amp. And these were taken from machines that have been written off. What's happening is these power supplies are over 10 years old, and what's happening is the capacitors in them are starting to fail. And in both of these machines, what happens is, on the Eversys one, as soon as you turn the machine on, it goes through a cycle. What happens is, once you start loading the power supply up to a certain point, it just shuts off. Thermoplan one, I believe that one wouldn't actually turn on. What happened was the machines were written off as they were irreparable, which is a shame really, because these power supplies can be repaired. But on the plus side, I now got two power supplies I can fix and sell on. Customers quoted £850 for a new power supply for the Thermoplan one, and it was £1,400 for the Eversys one. So definitely worthwhile having a stab at repairing them. This is a 2014 Eversys machine, so this power supply is from 2014, so that makes it 11 years old, and this one's from a 2015 or 2016 Thermoplan model, so that's certainly around the 10-year-old mark. And what usually happens with these is, I don't know how well this is going to come up on camera. What I'll do is I'll zoom you in a bit. I don't know how well it comes up on camera. You can see this capacitor is actually domed up. Let's see if we can bring it a bit closer. Yeah, I don't know how well you can see this, but the capacitor is actually domed at the top, which means it's failed. And generally speaking, if one of them's failed, generally all of them are on the way out. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these capacitors out, stick them on my tester, see what the tester reads, and we'll go from there. I have got some new capacitors. We're going to change all our capacitors, but we'll just test them first to see what the issue is. So we'll start off with this one here. So I'll fire up my desoldering gun and we'll desolder them. Back in a moment. Just before we get too far, we're working on DC power supplies like this. Common failures, as I said, capacitors. I just want to have a look around the board. One of the other common things to fail is the high voltage diode, which I believe, no, it's that one there. You have the high voltage diode on the output side. To rectify it, they can fail and go short circuit, but that generally doesn't cause it to, basically if the output diode fails, it'll either short, which means you'll get no power coming out, or it'll give you weird issues. But for the general rules, usually capacitors are a diode. Obviously if it fails too badly, you'll pop the fuse, but generally speaking on these particular boards, they're well made. Generally just capacitors when they get old. If the fuse blows, it's usually the bridge rectifier failed, or so we'll just connect the wires up. This one here is a 400 volt 220 microfarad. Stick that on, so 220 volt 400 microfarad should be a really low resistance. What happens is these capacitors, when they get old, especially these, because they sit in like a next to a coffee machine boiler, and these machines are on sort of like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and ultimately what happens is they sort of dry out and wear out. So this is 400 volt 220 microfarad. I'll just turn the tester on like so, and what we're getting on this one, I'm watching, the screen isn't really picking it up, what I'll do is I'll overlay a photo of the screen. I could probably zoom out a bit for this. It's reading 201 UF with an ESR of 2 ohms, which is incredibly high for one of these low ESR capacitors. So what we'll do is we'll move on to the next one. So that one's failed, or reached the end of its working life. We'll move on to this one here. One of the other things we want to be checking is this bit here. This is a diode on the output. I want to check to make sure that's all alright. And while we're here, just sort of give it a nice visual inspection, make sure everything looks alright. It works, it just crashes out, so we just want to sort of doubly make sure that there's no issues as such. But again, it could do with a bit of a clean up really, but I'll do that later. Nothing on there screams issue. It doesn't smell of anything. So I reckon, yeah, stick a new set of capacitors in there and we'll be away. And again, we're just going to repeat the process for this Eversys one. That one will be the same again. That one capacitors failed, so I'm guessing this one's probably on the way out. That one's failed. We'll go from there. So, more Eversys machine or Thermoplan machine, doing the same thing, runs for a few seconds, crashes out, switches itself off, and then after a little while it resets itself. Could be capacitor issues. We've got 3 failed capacitors on the Thermoplan one. There's no reason to suggest we won't have this on this one. So what we'll do is we'll check the stores of capacitors, because there is one thing I want to mention. In fact, I'll do it now. On these Thermoplan Eversys ones, they use these L-Tech ones, and this purple one here is an ultra low ESR capacitor, so it is it's a bit specialist and a bit niche, so you can't just stick normal. Well, there's a reason why the people who manufacture the power supplies spec them instead of standard low ESR capacitors. I don't know if I've got any ultra low ESR capacitors in this size. I'll have to have a look, but I certainly know, you know, these are quite common. I do a few of these power supplies every now and then, so I keep a few of the capacitors. Although, one thing to mention is on Thermoplan machines, probably Eversys as well, different ages of machines use different power supplies. They don't all use the same power supply, so this video might not be suitable for you, but the principle's still the same. Just I have different capacitors on. If I could be organised, I'll list all the capacitors and put them in a kit, and I'll list them on eBay in case you want to repair your power supply. One thing to suggest is this isn't an easy job, but it's not a hard job. You just need to, as I say, desolder them out. The little ones aren't too bad. The big one's a bit of a awkward one to desolder because you've got these big heavy tracks that sap all the heat away. But yeah, we'll strip this Eversys one down. Might make a time lapse of it actually. Taking these old capacitors out, and we'll go from there. Unfortunately, I lost some of the footage of me putting the new capacitors in and testing them, but here we are. Either the new or power supplies with the new capacitors. One of them I had to put a new diode on the output. Tested them, they're all working fine. So yeah, if you're having issues with your Thermoplan or Eversys power supply, you can either send it off to be repaired by a specialist, or you can have a go at it yourself. I'll see if I can put a kit together and I'll list that in the description. So yeah, some new capacitors and a new diode. We tested them, obviously we can't test them at full load, but we tested them at a good few amps for a good period of time, and they seem to be holding out steady. So yeah, I'm going to call them fixed. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.